What it do, U.S. history people? I'm going to make some review for the cause of the Great Depression for both the exam and just because if you were gone or you need it gone over again, it might help for me to explain it. So I'm gonna try to go quick because I only have 5 minutes per video. So yeah, that's what we're gonna do. Maybe. Anyway, okay. So I'll skip through this part because it talks about the stock market game in general. But we kind of broke it down into long term, short term, or like immediate, and then failed responses. So I'll go through the long term really quick. The ground rules, I'll let you read at your leisure. But basically, we talked. I just try to go through some basics on how do you make an economy grow and what causes an economy to contract. So it really just comes down to do people have access to money and do they spend their money? They feel comfortable enough to spend their money, or they feel like they have enough, or they feel like the economy is good enough to be able to spend money. So you could have businesses paying high wages or giving more profits to stockholders, banks giving out loans at lower interest rates to consumers and businesses, and also the government, because the government can borrow money as well, which you're going to see during the Great Depression. And the Federal Reserve, which is like the Bank of the United States, could increase the money supply by making interest rates lower, or that causes interest rates to be lower, and money is more attainable. Okay, the opposite would make everything contract, lower wages, lower profits of businesses, um, making interest rates higher, and then decreasing the money supply. So the first concept or section, I guess, was on long-term causes. So here's some long-term causes, and I called it trouble looms. But basically, what we're looking at here are all the different examples of a um, cyclical recession. So a recession is a downturn in the economy. A cyclical recession is going to be, and for you, I'm right here. It's going to be a downturn economy, and cyclical means that it's kind of part of the business cycle. So the business cycle, the economy kind of goes through ups and downs. They call them expansions, peaks, contractions, and troughs. You don't even really know that, but these are examples of how one could look at the U.S. economy during the 1920s, near the end of the 1920s, and see a cyclical depression or recession coming. So key industries barely making a profit because of World War One. World War One kind of was a boom for a lot of demand for different industries. So you started to see that go away when World War One was over. A lot of the other big consumer spending, again, the 1920s were a time of a lot of consumer spending. So as people bought more stuff, they tended to one kind of just run out of money in general, and two, when you buy a car, when you buy a lot of consumer goods, you don't need to buy a lot within a small period of time. So once people had everything, they kept producing these things, but there just weren't enough people to buy them. Number of housing starts began to fall, which just means that the housing market is usually a key indicator of the economy. So these things, you don't need to memorize every single one, but knowing a couple examples of cyclical recession. This is something that you can kind of like slow it down and make it not so bad once the contraction happens, but it's kind of just a natural cycle of capitalist economies. Here's an example of some various booms and busts throughout history. You can see there's a very big growth in the economy in the 1920s, but then it kind of went way back down. But that's kind of happened a lot throughout history. The other long-term cause of the Great Depression was what was going on with farmers. So a lot of farmers had crops that were in high demand. We looked at a political cartoon that kind of reminds you of this with the the like jumpy thing or the diving board. But farmers' crops had been in high demand during World War One, and then after the war, that demand started to come down, which means you saw a fall in crop prices. Even though a lot of farmers had taken out loans to expand their farms, which caused a lot of rural banks to fail and also a lot of farmers to go out of business. The other thing that really hurt farmers was the Dust Bowl, which was going to kind of make crops like they're kind of destroyed a lot of farmers' fields and then made it harder for them to make money off of crops. Okay. Another one that I mentioned slightly before is consumer spending. So by the late 1920s, Americans were just spending less, and there's a couple different reasons for this. Prices were rising as more and more people bought stuff during the 20s until things got too expensive. That's called inflation. Wages were pretty stagnant, which means people weren't making a lot more money. A lot of profit was going to businesses, but not necessarily to workers. And then if people couldn't afford things, they started overbuying things on credit. So once you take on too much debt, eventually you're going to have to cut back your spending or you're going to have a big problem in the future. But both of those things, regardless, are going to cause problems for the economy. Also, economic inequality was very high during this time, which led to people, um, a lot of rich people, a lot of poor people, which is a good predictor of economic downturns, which is right there for you. Um, I talked about government policies. I'll let you look at that because I'm not exactly sure how much time I have left on my recording. Um, so I'll probably stop. But let's see. I think I can see.